Hey everybody, welcome back to You Are What You Loved. My guest this week is Mike Schubert. He's a podcaster. You've heard him on some amazing shows, but most recently you should check out The Newest Olympian, in which he reads the best book series of all time. It's
Ooh.
I know, strong, throwing strong words down. But Percy Jackson and the Olympians is being read for the first time by Mike Schubert, and you should absolutely turn in. My goodness, you should absolutely
turn in, turn up. Yeah.
And you should also check out his show, Modern Muckraker. So, welcome to the podcast, Mike.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks for hanging out. So what are we talking about today? What is the piece of media that changed who you are as a person?
Today, the piece of media that changed me was, and I'm glad that you were so gracious as to let me use a different definition of media because this was more formative than a television program or something. But I saw Bo Burnham live in college, when I was in college. Not to flex, I'm honestly not trying to sound like a, oh, look at me kind of guy, but I saw him at a very tiny venue in Houston called Numbers Nightclub, and it was maybe like a 50 to 100 seat thing. And small enough where he had a meet and greet after. That level of Bo Burnham's fame, where I got to talk to him and stuff, and he was a very nice dude. And that kind of just changed me and my understanding of what it would be like to be a professional, funny man, comedian, etc. And just knowing that there isn't necessarily one path to making a career out of stuff like this.
I love that, and I also am really glad that you picked something that's not a movie or a TV show or a book, because I think there's something about live performance, and especially Bo Burnham specifically, which we can get into, that is just so different, and so it feels so intense and can connect with you really well. But I also love that you have such a hesitation about saying the word comedian when referring to yourself. Like, you said like 12 things before you...
It's just hard because I know it's very strange and weird, and I never want to give people like the wrong impression. Because even just when I was doing improv, all my relatives would be like, oh, are you going to use this joke in one of your improv sets? And I was like, that's not how it works. It's not stand up. I don't write things. It's made up on the spot. So I don't want to give anyone the wrong impression. I do sometimes tongue in cheek joke. Anytime I make a funny joke, I say, well, I'm a professional comedian. So my podcasts are comedic and they are my job. So by the transitive property, I'm a professional comedian, just not in the traditional sense.
I heavily relate as someone who does stand up to the "are you going to use this?" or here my favorite is always "here's a joke you should use," and it's never a joke you should use. So
no,
ever.
Right.
A funny joke has never followed "here's a joke you should use in your stand up."
Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you so
Aunt
much.
Margaret.
Oh my goodness. So you saw him in college. So what tour would that have been? That would have been really early.
This was his very first tour, which was called the Bo Burnham and No Friends Tour, which is a great name for a tour. So this was, I want to say, my sophomore year, either my freshman or sophomore year. So it was like 2015.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a big fan of his just from watching his YouTube videos and all kind of stuff like that. At the time, I was big into making YouTube videos. So I started making YouTube videos in high school, my junior year, because one of my good friends, Adam, he was starting to pursue stand-up comedy when he was in college. He was 21, and I wanted to do stand-up kind of stuff, but I just wasn't old enough to perform anywhere because I was 17.
Right.
So I kind of made YouTube video blog type stuff in more of a storytelling like stand-up style. And I just did them on YouTube because I wasn't old enough and I wasn't allowed to go to open mic nights and stuff like that. So I was interested in that kind of thing. And Bo Burnham was just a guy whose videos I really enjoyed. And when he was coming to Houston and tickets were like $20 or whatever, I jumped on the opportunity, and it was an incredible show. And a lot of the stuff I saw ended up in his first special that I believe is on his YouTube channel for free called What? So a good chunk of the bits from the show that I saw were there, but also at the show that I saw, it was a lot of him just performing live versions of his most popular YouTube videos. And that didn't happen at all in his stand-up set, What?
Yeah. It was all new material at that point. So for you at that point, you had a desire to be in comedy, but it was just sort of something you couldn't necessarily do in a traditional sense yet.
Yeah, my plan that thank goodness it worked. But when I was a junior in high school, I was really into The Lonely Island a lot.
Okay.
Like very early days of Lonely Island, there's stuff beyond and before SNL. I very much was interested in doing something in the like comedic video space. And when I saw them and other people who were starting to make it on YouTube, when that started to become a thing, I thought, okay, you don't necessarily need to study film or whatever in college
Yeah.
to have a job in it. You just have to be good. And for me at that point in high school, I was very good at math and science. And I basically devised this plan where I was going to go to college for engineering, major in it, get a stable engineering job. And then I would just do that during the day. And then at night, do stand up or make videos or do improv or whatever. And my thought was that this was just the improved version of I waited tables during the day and did clubs till 2 a.m. at night. Like it was just my, what if you did that, but instead of being a waiter, which I was in high school and that sucked. I thought, what if I do that, but I make more money and actually don't have to deal with the awfulness that is human beings that don't like to tip at restaurants. So that was always the plan. And then I was just always doing kind of fun stuff on the side. So even going to college for engineering, my thought process was always, yeah, I'm just getting the thing that I need the degree for as like the backup plan. And then any free time I had, I was doing YouTube videos and stuff like that. I was trying out and eventually made the improv team. So there was always the plan of I want to get financially stable and make a jump. And I was fortunate enough that I was able to do that. Didn't think it would be podcasting, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Here we are. Didn't know what a podcast was when I hatched this plan.
You know what is crazy is you are the first person I have talked to who had the same engineering to creative jump that I did.
Let's go.
Yeah, right. Did you have? Well, so you went to school for engineering. I did end up going to film school after a gap year of working in engineering.
Okay.
But I noticed, and I wonder if you run into this now. Kind of in the same way we talk about people not wanting to talk about what they love because people are sort of kind of eye rolly about it. When I went to film school and people found out that I used to do engineering and like had worked in engineering I was in the comp sci space for a year, they were like, "Why are you here? You could be making a living."
Oh, that's funny.
You could be making money.
That's very, very funny.
But that's cool. So you had this sort of predisposition for something that maybe is seen as more traditional, more viable as a career path in life, and you sort of just saw it as a step towards what you actually wanted to do.
Right. And the whole Bo Burnham career trajectory, obviously, I don't think I'm going to become what he is, where he's good at literally everything he does, and it's not fair. But I remember at that time, so 2015, that was right around when people were starting to become full-time just with YouTube and stuff like that, where people were making careers just from like Google AdSense money and stuff on YouTube.
Yeah.
And I was not there with my YouTube stuff. I had a nice following, but I knew that wasn't necessarily in the cards. And I was also kind of hesitant towards that because it's just always so risky to be tied to like one particular platform, because what if people stop watching YouTube videos? Obviously people still do now, but like it's very different. And YouTubers that were famous in 2015, no one knows who they are anymore now,
Right.
even people who are on top of the world. So I always was a little hesitant towards saying, oh, what if I was a full-time YouTuber? So getting to see Bo Burnham kind of become an enormous YouTuber and then him actively push away just making it as a YouTuber and instead, because I always thought, why doesn't this guy just go all in on YouTube? Every video he makes gets so many views. Why doesn't he just make more? I don't understand this. And it was really smart of him to do it and inspiring for me to see him say, okay, instead of me go all in on this thing that is more temporary, I'm going to use this as a launching platform for things that are more stable, which is just performing at venues and making my name for myself, just
Right.
me as an entity, not necessarily me, comma, the YouTuber. And I was fascinated by his ability to take that and funnel it into his own thing, and then getting to actually see the show and see what he did, because I didn't know exactly what he was going to do. I thought it was just going to be him doing his YouTube videos live. Seeing the other stuff was like, oh, okay, there's so much
Yeah.
more here going on than I had anticipated.
Yeah, and I guess for people who don't know, Bo Burnham is not just it sounds so bold to say. If you are listening to this and you don't know who Bo Burnham is, because I feel he's kind of reached that level, right?
Right.
But if you don't know, he started as a musical comedian on YouTube, which is
Hmm.
very different path. D-
Certainly.
did you watch his MTV show? Zach
I
Stone is going to be
didn't.
famous.
I watched clips of it, but I didn't have a lot of time in high school to watch TV because I went to a really hard high school and I
Yeah,
was super busy. But I did watch a couple of clips of it, and I remember not thinking it was great. And then in hindsight, I think it was just ahead of its time.
yeah,
Like if you look back at the concept, it's like, oh yeah, that's actually hilarious.
yeah, yeah. No,
But
it
yeah,
was.
I just didn't I just didn't watch it. I didn't watch a lot of TV at all. And then the streaming stuff, it was like weird and you had to like log in and all that. I couldn't figure it out. But I remember seeing clips and thinking some of it was funny, but not being over the moon about it.
Yeah. I was just curious about like he did really jump from that YouTube literally in his bedroom to
Hmm.
that huge, I mean, HBO, Comedy Central, MTV, massive, huge.
Hmm.
So that's really cool. Good for him, I
Yeah.
suppose.
Shout out, Bo.
Shout out to Bo. Well, so did you go to the show by yourself or did you go with friends?
I went with two friends. I went with one of my sweet mates, Joseph, and one of my friends from college, Spencer. I believe that they had at least seen his videos and stuff before. I don't think they were going in completely not knowing who he was.
Yeah.
I was certainly like the biggest fan of it. And I was very excited to go to the show. We got there very early. We got good seats because it was just a general admission ticket. And I even brought I had a flip video camera.
Oh,
If anyone
yes.
remembers what those are, yeah. So I had one of those, which is what I made all my YouTube videos on. And I wanted to film parts of the show to like A, have it, and then B, I was going to make a video about seeing him live. And flip those videos, when you hit record, they had a little red light that would show up. You
Yeah.
could turn it off in the settings so that you'd be more secretly recording. And I forgot to do that. And when he was doing New Math, which was my favorite song of his, I wanted to record the whole song. So I turned it on, and some security guy came on stage and saw my camera and like pointed to me and made like a put it away sign. And Bo noticed it and made a very good joke where he said, "Oh, what are you going to do? Film me singing a song and then put it on YouTube?" Oh, wait. And it was very, very good. And then he did the song. Of course, I felt incredibly nervous, but he seemed to be a good sport about it. And then after, when he did the meet and greet, he was, signing stuff. He had posters, and we caught some of he did the "Magic Isn't Real, You Idiot" intro
Oh,
to that he does in What.
yeah.
So we had caught some of the deck of cards that he threw into the crowd, which I thought was an incredible opening intro thing. And he was signing those in our posters. And then he saw me. He was like, "Oh, you were the guy with the camera, right?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm really sorry." He goes, "Dude, I don't give a fuck. Like, you can upload whatever. Clearly, it doesn't matter." And then he asked, "Oh, do you make YouTube videos?" And then he did ask me for my channel. I didn't have any sort of index card or
Yeah.
anything. So he wrote my YouTube URL on the back of his Sharpie box that he had just opened to sign stuff with. I don't know if he ever watched my videos. He never reached out to me, but there is a chance that he watched my videos like, "This guy sucks," or he just like lost the Sharpie box or never took it out or whatever. Because it was a big tour. It was like lots of cities.
Yeah.
But I at least had a conversation, and he asked for my YouTube channel, which was pretty cool. So maybe if we ever cross paths in the world, I'll say, "Do you remember the guy who got yelled at one of your first shows?" And he'll probably say, "No, but that sounds like fun."
Sounds like a great time.
It was a blast, and I had a good time. My friends and I had a good time. Believe we took pictures with Bo, but it was one of those things where I think my friend took the picture because I didn't have a camera phone. That's how
Yeah.
old this was. I just had a little slide out phone with a garbage camera. And I think my friend had the better camera, took a photo, uploaded it to Facebook, and then I was like, "Oh, it's on Facebook. It'll be here forever." And then
You lost it.
I don't use Facebook anymore, so I don't know if that photo's still there or not. Who's to say?
One thing that has struck me about Bo and strikes me in your story as well is that he's just very gracious, like very good at
Mhm.
meeting fans.
Yeah, incredibly humble, incredibly down to earth, and that truly has inspired me. This whole live show experience inspired me in a lot of different ways, but one that it really did was the way that he interacted with people after the show. I thought was awesome, and I really tried to emulate it when I do shows, because I'm fortunate enough now where I get to do live shows, and it's similar to the venue where I saw Bo now, where I'm usually selling about like 100, sometimes more, sometimes less tickets. Sometimes in
Mhm.
bigger cities, you'll get up to like 160.
Yeah.
Smaller cities, like I just did a show in Asbury Park, New Jersey, and it was like 75, 80 people.
Mhm.
And pre-COVID, I would always do the show, come out, take pictures, sign stuff, and all of that. Now I don't do as much because I am just trying to be safe for
Yeah.
myself and my guest and anyone at the show. I don't want to like make a big line of people and stuff like that. But when I would meet people and whenever I do meet people at any sort of performance or convention or whatever, I try to be just as normal and humble about it because he was just like a guy. He was just a
Yeah.
guy.
Yeah.
And I think that's how I try to approach it too. And I don't try to act like I'm some big fancy schmancy deal because I know I'm not. And I always want to just make sure that when people do meet me, especially people are like, oh my gosh, I'm so nervous. It's like, don't. I'm just a boy who didn't read books and then did read books and talked about it. It's fine. And I am very lucky to be in this career spot that I'm in. And I'm very fortunate to be able to do this. And I'm very fortunate that when I do shows, you have people that take care of the sound and the lights and the tech and the hospitality. And there's so many people that go into running shows that are behind the scenes that I try to be super gracious for all the people that helped make the show exist. And then, of course, the people who attended the show, because if people weren't going to come to the show, I wouldn't be performing. So I'm very lucky, and I try to be as gracious about it as I can be because it's
Yeah.
a very silly, fun thing that I get to do. And I'm very glad that I get to do it.
I've seen Bo a couple of times live, and they've always been. It was cool to watch his process, I guess. So on his Make Happy tour was the last time I saw him. But he was working on that in LA, and then I saw him in Boston on Proper Tour, and then obviously saw the final
Netflix
special,
show.
yeah, the Netflix
Yeah.
special. And watching his process is something that I think is crazy too, because he has such a precision about it. Like there are
Mhm.
very, very tiny tweaks, which I remember when we were watching him like on YouTube, when he started doing live shows, you could see those tweaks because so many people were like you with their little flip cameras recording. And he was like, yeah, I don't care. But you can see like such little changes that he's made going through with where he's like, this one thing would be funnier if I move this light cue to like 4 seconds earlier, or those little
Right.
things. Did you feel like that precision and I like that specificity of comedy existed when you saw him back then?
Yeah, I hadn't really seen anyone do a stand-up set like him before. And I was pretty into stand-up because I was a 7th grader in the year 2006. So
Yep.
I liked Dane Cook, as we all did. It was just contractually obligated by 7th grade boys. In hindsight, yikes. But I definitely enjoyed different stand-up sets and different stand-up comedians. And when I saw Bo's set, I was impressed by, like you say, with the precision, the particular cues where there is a sound cue or a visual cue for a particular joke. I thought it was so awesome and so unique and so tough. Like you
Yeah.
don't have to just remember your jokes, which is already hard enough as it is. And I've done stand up and I have a hard enough time just trying to remember how I want to word the particular joke. I always preferred improv or something where it's more off the cuff. I think I'm just better at that. It's hard enough just to remember the particular wording. For him to remember the particular wording, and I need to stand here and I need to do this, and the lights are going to change at this moment. And it just was so unique to me that for many different reasons, this show, and this was another one of them, I just thought, oh, this is a thing you can do. It doesn't just have to be you standing on stage and making jokes. You can throw confetti out of your pocket and you can have audio cues come in to do all sort of jokes. And I've done a little bit of those things with my performances. Nothing near the degree to what he does, but it was just really nice for me to see, oh, okay, stand-up comedy doesn't just have to be a guy in a black t-shirt standing in front of a mic stand being funny. You can do whatever, and the rules don't matter. And I think that's like the overarching thing of why I picked this, is that this whole experience in a lot of different ways just showed me the traditional rules of being a professional comedian don't matter.
Yeah.
If people want to pay money to see you do your thing live, then you can make it as a professional comedian. So do your thing. You don't have to adapt to like what it means in the industry, etc.
I wish everyone could have seen the number of air quotes you put.
Big ol' air quotes, big air quotes going around.
I think that that lack of rules is really cool because it is like such a technical performance in a space where typically you should be able to simply stand with a mic stand, maybe even not a mic stand, and perform your show. But he very much needs each piece of that performance to give you what you came to see. And there's something cool about like kind of realizing that you could find your audience no matter what you wanted to talk about or what you wanted to do. There's someone out there who, if they want to watch it, then it counts. I
Yeah.
like that. Yeah, I like that. Did you feel like, I know when I was watching Bo early on, as someone who also, I feel like it's just that early 2000s space. Anybody who ended up liking comedy quietly will one day admit to you that they watched all of Dane Cook's comedy, which my sister and I call it like a gateway drug to comedy. Like,
Yes.
you
It
know,
was the first like true stand-up thing I listened to. And in retrospect, of course, Dane Cook now, huge, gross, terrible
right?
person.
Of course, yeah.
Some of the stuff is funny. Like some of the stuff holds up. But a
Agreed.
lot of it is just yelling and just, this is not funny, this is just loud.
Yeah.
But yeah, as a gateway thing, yes, that is what eventually led me to finding people and being interested in people that are way funnier and much more talented, like Mitch Hedberg or Mike Birbiglia or anybody else who like actually puts craft in it and doesn't just, I don't know, say shortened words and then it's funny because instead of saying the situation, he said the sitch, but said it loudly. Like,
or the B&E, the BK Lounge.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right.
Which
in
we're
my
revealing.
defense, in my defense, I was 12. Okay, come on, cut me some slack.
Oh man. No, well, you know what's so funny is that like, yeah, it is that 12-year-old boy comedy, but at the same time, like my sister and I will sometimes still make a reference to an old Dane Cook like album and forget that that's where the joke came from. Like that's why it's so funny. Like we will be like, "Do you want to go to the BK Lounge?" And then we're like, "Oh wait, that's a Dane Cook joke." But I guess my thought on that though, or my question so far is sort of that I think Bo Burnham, when you first started out, when you were trying to explain it to people or trying to get people to watch his videos or anything like that, did you ever find when you were like, he does musical comedy, people were like, okay, no thank you?
It depended on who I was describing it to. My parents never would have made sense. I don't think I ever showed them that, especially because I knew at the time that some of the jokes were edgy jokes. Looking back, watching some of those videos, there's way more yikes stuff in there than I remember. And thankfully, Bo Burnham has admitted that in Inside and has very much been open about, there's a lot of bad jokes where I was really just trying to be an edgy comedy boy. And a lot of it, just looking back, is ooh. Yeah. So I definitely couldn't explain it to someone like my parents. Thankfully, because I was big into YouTube and stuff, a lot of my internet friends were all YouTube friends. So they either knew of him or it was very easy to describe it to them and it was easy. And then I guess the only other thing that would happen is that thing that everybody did in the mid 2010s, which was, oh, have you seen this YouTube video? And then clicking play and then just praying that people laugh because it's just such a huge, oh man, I'm in charge of the YouTube and I've picked the video. So
yeah.
I think that I didn't struggle too much with it because just the model of funny songs, like Weird Al was a thing and we all liked him as kids and he had been around for a while. So thankfully I didn't have too much trouble with it. But yeah, for anyone less in the know, it would have been confusing. Definitely when I would explain to like my parents, oh, what are you doing tonight? Oh, I'm going to the Bo Burnham concert. Who's that? He's this YouTuber I like. You know, that's when it started to get a little weirder.
Like, you're watching him do what? Cool. Very cool. I always find, I guess now, to me, Weird Al and Bo are like the two people who've made, and this is probably bold and I'm going to show how much I don't know about comedy history, but to me in the mainstream, they've made musical comedy cool. Like it's funny and cool and everyone loves it.
Yeah, I think different people who do it bring different things to the genre. Like Weird Al just like made parody things possible and it was fun. I think Bo was very much more on the anything can be a song kind of thing. Cause like some of his most popular videos were either just like all wordplay based or the one about math or just, you know, braggadocious rap kind of thing. Lil Dicky, I think also contributed. A comedy thing can just sound like a regular rap song. And then I remember there was a guy that I was so smaller, but I appreciated, named MC Mr. Napkins, who did
MC Mr. Napkins.
Yeah, okay. He just had really, 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 really nerdy rap stuff. Just I think one of his rap songs was called Anti-Penultimate, and it was just describing what the word anti-penultimate means, which is the thing before the end.
Right.
And there's just lots of little specific things there. So yeah, I feel like everybody's got a different take to it, and now we're at a point where there's lots of different things you can do in the funny music space.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I can't believe I left off, especially because we talked about them earlier, The Lonely Island. But
right. Gosh. Yeah. And that was, I think they were more on like the videos. It was saying that the music video can bring a lot to the table. So it was cool just to kind of see all of that grow over time, especially in my formative years of trying to come up with comedic stuff. Yeah. I watched Lazy Sunday, that first funny SNL digital short that The Lonely Island did, or at least the first one that went super big with Andy Samberg and Chris Parnell, where they rapped about seeing the Chronicles of Narnia in theaters.
Mm-hmm.
Like I bought that episode of SNL on my iPod video so that I could watch that because it just wasn't on YouTube. And I would just watch just that part of the SNL episode. And I just thought that was so funny. God, Lazy Sunday was a big one for me.
It was a good one. It was that, it's such a specific era of comedy, or like just it's in that really formative years for, I think, the people who are kind of our age and coming up now and moving through that space where it's like, Lazy Sunday on your iPod video, that's such a specific image to me. Something else about Bo that I think is really interesting and I'm kind of curious about for you, especially as someone who's moved into podcasting and being sort of personal in what you're doing. Like your podcasts are funny, but it is much more about your personality and your own personal journey to some degree. Bo is really vulnerable, and a lot of times his jokes aren't funny. Like there's just a song that's really sad. And did that kind of inform how much of your personal life should be involved in your comedy?
I feel like it's something that I didn't necessarily realize in the moment. So maybe it did subconsciously, but now once I was doing it more full time, it became more clear. I think I didn't necessarily realize it when I saw it, but I did appreciate that he was making jokes about himself in his earliest set. He has the thing, he ended it with the thing where he ends with like the Mr. Burnham and people calling him the F slur and stuff like that, where he was very open about what other people think of him and just embracing it. And I remember that was something I kind of had to come to grips with just from doing YouTube videos where I would just get hate comments all the time. If any video went viral, just the YouTube comments section would be an absolute cesspool. So I think at the time I interpreted it more as don't worry about what other people think of you and less about letting people in to be more vulnerable. I think as I went on, I think that made more sense. I think it was more of a later thing that I got with Bo Burnham, but I really got with some other comedians. Like I'm a huge Mike Birbiglia guy. I think he's very good. My ex-girlfriend's boyfriend, I think, is still my favorite stand-up set of all time. Absolutely. I cry every time I listen to it. And what I really appreciated there, that I think Bo Burnham probably planted the seeds of, but I didn't necessarily realize, I really appreciated that because I didn't just, from that point on, after hearing that stand-up set, I didn't want to just watch a stand-up set that was funny. I wanted a stand-up set that like made me think about things and make me feel things. And that's kind of how I felt with John Mulaney. I saw him live, his last one, and I remember the like Comeback Kid or whatever. And I remember seeing that in Houston being like, oh yeah, that was fun. But that was like, it was, for me, it was like comedy fast food where it's like, I ate this, I enjoyed it, I got no nutrition out of this, where like I still think about things in some other sets like My Ex-Girlfriend's Boyfriend or Nanette, like things that make you really like process what does this mean. And those things help me realize, oh, if you're letting people in, you can talk and people can relate to an actual personal experience. The other thing that those sets helped me realize is that if you talk about personal experience and you make fun of yourself, you're never punching down. And that I always appreciated. And that's something that I truly developed over starting to make Potterless. My first big podcast was early on, I was kind of like making fun of some stuff. Not too bad. I think I still started from an okay spot. But as I've gone on, I definitely try to make sure if I'm doing any sort of thing, don't put anybody down. It's just not necessary. And in
Yeah.
my old YouTube videos, like I totally did that. I was susceptible to making like rage videos and calling out stuff and all that. It's like, what are we doing here? This is not fun. So I certainly pivoted to making fun of myself and punching up and never trying to punch down.
Yeah. I think that's such a strong thing that's so important that really does make the comedy better. Like not punching down, but being able to punch at yourself or punching up. It is comedy. It's a stronger form of comedy. And when you're
Mhm.
punching down, ultimately, usually it's just actually not funny. You're just looking for shock value or bullying.
Right. It's gross. And the other thing is, if you're able to make fun of yourself better than anyone else can, nobody can ever make you feel bad. Like
Yeah.
if you know all the cool jokes that people would say about you, then it's like, great, I've already thought of that.
Great. Yes, I
So
also
if
hate
I
that
think
about
of
me.
it, yeah, if I already think of it first, then you can't get me down. If you say that my face is abnormally long, tough luck, bud. I've already written a bunch of jokes about that. Game over, baby.
Yeah. Did you happen to see my set where I talked about that? Thank you.
Come on.
I love that. Yeah, I think something that's really prevalent in most of the comedians that you mentioned that you find kind of influential is that idea of being perceived and being willing to sort of invite that in, right? Which I think is pretty cool, and it's a really personal style of being a performer and a comedian. And one thing that I think really knocked that out of the park with Bo was 8th grade, which I'm not sure. Did you see 8th grade?
I saw it because I
Yeah.
really enjoyed Bo. And when I found out that he was directing / writing / whatever else he did, I thought, all right, let's see this. I don't know if it's going to be good. And then I remember watching the movie and it was so good. And I was so angry at how good it was. Like, how can he be so good at everything? Because I think at that point, I forget the timeline. I don't know if that was before or after he just decided to be the best Viner on Vine for a
Oh, it was
year and then
after,
leave.
yeah.
It was, yeah. So
Yeah.
I just remember thinking, okay, this guy was great on YouTube. He's great at stand-up. He was great at Vine. Now he's a great writer-director. This is not fair. And he's like 6'5". This is not fair. Come on. He was like white Donald Glover, where it's like, you can't be good at everything. It's not fair.
It's
Like,
rude.
pick one thing and give your other talents to somebody else. Like,
Yeah, or at
you're
least be
taking,
quiet
come
about
on.
it.
Yeah. So yes, I remember seeing 8th grade and being incredibly impressed.
Yeah.
But it made sense because seeing kind of the jokes that he made, he had a really good finger on the lens of the harms of social media. He was always very open about why he didn't want to get too into YouTube or when he left Vine, why he decided to leave it. He was always like ahead of the curve of seeing the dangers of that kind of stuff. So to basically write a whole movie about that was brilliant. And because he was so big on YouTube, that's why when she's doing the YouTube stuff, like, oh, that stung so hard. Like uploading a video that gets 12 likes, like, oh my God, it hit so close to home. Like that movie made me feel so uncomfortable in the best way. He truly knocked it out of the park.
It was stunning. I saw it actually at I can't even remember how we got these tickets, but I've loved Bo forever, and my sister's 5 years younger than me, and we've both just really genuinely loved Bo like forever. And so he was like, okay, this movie's coming out, and somehow we ended up with tickets to see it at an early screening at a
Cool.
at a WGA event. So that movie feels like it was made for people kind of born like 90s and after. But the theater that we saw that movie in was full of like industry execs or like people trying to kind of wine and dine. And he and Elsie did a Q&A after, and it was really personal and great and wonderful. But I remember Alex, my sister, and I were sitting kind of like in the middle of the theater, surrounded by a bunch of people who were like, I'm here because Bo Burnham is this, rising star that I need to be in the room for. And she and I are just like sobbing, like weeping. Like at one point I cried so hard at that movie that I made like an embarrassing noise, and I was like, I can't be here.
Oh my gosh.
And after he kind of stuck around and was saying hi to everybody, and my sister had really been kind of strongly touched by the movie, and she was a little bit closer to having just gotten out of high school, and she was closer to that age. So we went to go, wait to meet him after. And it was just this like wall of dudes, like all like 5'10" or above, and we're quite short, and it's just like this wall of men, and then Bo is like towering over everybody else as well. He's being very gracious, shaking hands, taking the thank yous, and my sister looks like she's been. I mean, we both probably looked wrecked, but just like crying in a movie theater the whole time, and just like very like. At the point my sister was like, we should just go, like, we're never gonna get through this group of people. Bo like turned to the guy he was talking to and was like, could you excuse me for a minute, and like just moved through and like said hi, like he's like, hey, thank you for watching the movie, like really appreciate it, and talked to my sister for like 5 minutes, like took a picture with the two of them, and was just like, I just want to thank you for being here.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it was crazy. But I do think like he just has this understanding of a generation of sort of people who didn't feel like they knew where they were, like that do feel like you're in a theater full of people who are going to get a chance more than you are.
Yeah,
which is just but just so crazy. I don't know. There's so few celebrities that no one's had a bad experience with ever.
Right. And let's just hope that he keeps that up.
Yeah. Like, one day I'm going to be like, someone's going to comment, hey, did you know? And I'm like, oh.
I have hope. I have high hopes for him, but we'll see.
Yeah, fingers truly crossed. But that's I guess people are allowed to have bad days too.
Sure. Totally.
It's fine. I'm already
But I think the fact that
myself.
he is always kind of being aware of things that he's done that don't age particularly well. I was surprised, like in prep for Inside, I watched all the old sets and there were way more yikes stuff in the old sets. I knew the YouTube videos were going to have yikes stuff, but some of the old sets are like, oh, really? Like this was still here by his second special?
Yeah.
Like, so I think it's tough, but I'm glad that he's moved more away from it. And I remember my wife Kelly and I, after watching them before Inside came out, she said, I hope, and we both kind of agree with it, but she was like, I really don't like all the XF. I wish it was gone. And then I said, yeah, if it was just the like introspective stuff that makes you think and is just funny with punching up, I think that would be better. And then that was Inside. Like it was half introspection, half punching up. And I was like, oh, wow, cool. The exact thing that my wife and I ordered. Hooray. Thank you for delivering this to us. So,
like, please take off all the stuff except the bacon and the meat. That's what we're looking for. It's just the bacon and the cheese. Oh man, that's amazing. Yeah, I think there's something to the evolution of being willing to say, like, yes, everything I've done and choices that I've made that were perhaps not the best ones, they're still going to live on the internet. I'm not going to do that thing that people tend to do where they try to pretend it never happened and remove it. Just like acknowledging it and continuing to do better.
Yeah, that has been an inspiration to me too. So the first show was obviously a huge inspiration for me in my career, and just thinking like, oh, if I want to do this, here's a different way I can do it. I don't just have to get cast on SNL or whatever.
Yeah.
But then when I was doing podcasting and I would start to get emails about, language that I could use that was more inclusive or things I shouldn't poke fun at, all of that. At first, I would get frustrated by it because my intentions were always good. I wasn't ever trying to put anyone down. Like by saying, oh, that's so lame, I wasn't trying to be ableist. I just like didn't know that was a thing I shouldn't be saying. And at first when I would get these emails, I would get kind of upset. It's like, oh, come on, clearly I didn't mean that. But then thinking about it a little more, it's like, you know what? It's easy just to say synonym. I should just say synonym. And I remember appreciating, given how open and honest Bo was, like, look, a lot of my stuff is bad and I'm trying to be better. That was something that I tried to take into podcasting, is like, you're not going to hit on 100% of your jokes. You're going to say stuff that looking back is bad. The only thing that you can do at this point is just to be open to it and admit it, and not try to act like you were perfect from day one when you first started. It's all growth. And as long as you're open and honest about it, people will give you the benefit of the doubt. Some people sure might not, but I think ultimately with all people, anytime you're talking about wanting to improve, like we need a better way to say cancel culture that like actually means it, like,
right.
And not try like, but like the problem when any sort of that thing does happen, if people would just like genuinely apologize and improve and admit guilt, like that's like, then we'd be like, okay, great, thank you very much. Whereas most of the people just like dig their feet and are like, no, I never did this, blah blah blah. Like it's so wild that if you just apologize and then improve, everyone says, okay. Like what a novel concept. So that's something that I tried to take into my career, was just, as long as you continually be honest about not being perfect and show your work and don't try to sweep it under the rug. I always try to admit, hey, I used to say this that wasn't good, or I used to say, rank on the totem pole until someone who is indigenous was like, hey, maybe don't. And I was like, you're right. I should just say food chain or something else that doesn't rub anyone the wrong way. There's so many synonyms out there, and I've never tried to hide from it. I'm very happy to be open with it, and no one has ever held a grudge with me, and I haven't been canceled yet. So,
God. What a bar.
All you gotta do is apologize and move on. Like it's so easy. It's so easy. The bar is the floor. Like just don't dig your feet in underneath the bar. Like it's so easy.
It's just and I always do wonder like what is going through people's heads to be like, no, I'm not gonna. Why would I say sorry? It's because you hurt someone's feelings. Like you did something you didn't mean to.
It baffles me truly.
Yeah. I thought a great example of it was I don't know if you saw the Lizzo drama that happened recently.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, it was but it went away very quickly because she went in, she changed the word, and she, found a different word that rhymed. She's like, I had no idea. I'm very sorry. And
yeah, right. It's that simple. Yeah. If you just have the right approach, people will give you the benefit of the doubt, weirdly.
You
just act like a human. Yeah. It's almost like humans aren't perfect. So if you just admit to being a human, people will say, that's okay. I'm also one of those.
I'm always like, if you accidentally slammed someone's hand into a door and they said, oh my God, ow, that really hurt, you would say immediately without being told, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to do that.
You think that, but some people would say you shouldn't have had your hand in the way of the door. Like that's you have to remember that half of the world just sucks.
You're so right. Half of the world would be like, why was your hand in the middle of the door?
Clearly, the door had the right of way. Get your hand out of there.
You knew it was going to close. It's
your fault.
Oh my God. Yeah, but do those door hand people deserve platforms? I guess is the question.
No, they don't. We're very anti-door hand people here.
Keep your hands out of the door. Oh my God. Now I'm just, thinking about how terrible some people can be, despite the fact that we've had a lovely conversation about a wonderful man so far.
Yeah. One thing that we haven't discussed that I want to make sure we're getting to the performance of it too, and not just like the guy, because there was something that did also inspire me in a very different way. There was a joke he did that I think is in What? I think it's there too, where he does the thing where he reads poems from a book, and the poems have lots of wordplay. Some of the poems are a little but for the most part, it's clever wordplay. And then he does a bunch of them, and at least in the live show I saw, he then turned the book open to the crowd, and all the pages were blank. And I was like, fuck, that's really good.
Brilliant.
That's really, really good. The only thing that I did notice if you watch the Netflix one is there is one page that is written on in that notebook, and it is the front, and it just has all of the run of show basically written. You can see that at one point, which granted, totally fine. That is 1,000% valid. You have so many cues and little notes that you're trying to hit. That is fine. But when he did that, I remember thinking, that's really cool. And I appreciate that it was not only funny, but hard.
Yeah.
And I think that was just from a comedic perspective, it made me appreciate when people know that what you're doing is hard, they have that much more appreciation for it. And I think that is kind of what really made me interested in doing improv, which I did in college and afterwards and all of that. Anytime you can really prove that what you're doing is not pre-planned, it makes it more impressive. And that's something that I try to bring into my live shows for Potterless and what I'll do in the Newest Olympian. Eventually, if I do things that have some sort of element of randomness, any chance I can get to prove that this wasn't pre-planned, I want to do that. I want to do challenging things. And for Potterless live shows, we do things, we've done brackets and the brackets are like, what's the best food that you can eat in the Harry Potter universe, or what's the coolest spell or whatever. And me and my guests will always do these sort of things where each round will have another rule where we have to argue for what thing we should win in rhyming couplets, or we'll have to make acrostics, or you only have 10 words. People enjoy seeing a challenge. And that was one of the first instances I saw of, he didn't have to do this. He made it harder, and that made it funnier. And just kind of showing your work to prove it, I thought that was very cool.
I think I saw that same bit both on stage and in the special, and I have the book of poems that he then published afterwards, Egghead. Yeah, which has those poems in it.
God, he's good at another thing. Damn it. Damn it.
But the thing I remember about that joke hitting me was the moment right after the moment you're talking about. So he turns it over and it's blank. And I remember being like, oh, ha, ha. But he shouts, "Why am I lying to you?" and puts the book on his head. And I remember being like, yeah, why are you lying to me? I'm here to tell, like, to watch. But then I was like, of course, the whole thing is it's a performance. And there's something, I think he does a really cool thing in the same way of calling out, like, this is hard. He calls out, this is not, we are not like sharing this moment. This isn't me. I'm being very personal, but I'm being very vulnerable, but this is a performance.
Yes. And I think that is really nice, is that he does have the vulnerability. He does do the performance. But then I think it's in his second one, someone screams, "I love you." And he says, "You love the idea of me." At the same time, he's very aware. Yeah, I'm doing this, but it's not 100%. Like, it's, and he's, the honesty I think is really nice. And it's that. And then it's also with things like "Why Am I Lying to You?" and some of the other things he does in all the sets. He also seems to recognize that this is all very weird and strange. And then also just the industry of performance and stuff can be very weird and strange. And he never felt like he was above it. And I think it's from his second special where he's making fun of people who do stand-up comedy about, oh, here's a story that happened to me, and maybe flub the truth. And when he's doing this thing about, like, maybe you want to see other comedians, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
One of the jokes he says is like, if you want whatever, see another comedian, this actually happened to me. Cool. Like that. I was like, I like that kind of stuff. Made me think, and just always put inside me the idea that you don't have to do a thing just because that's the way it's been done. You can make it different. You can do your own thing. You can make it more true to you. And that kind of shaped me when I was making Potterless episodes. Like, there's a boatload of Harry Potter podcasts. All of them were like, oh, we're doing one chapter at a time. Yeah. And I thought, okay, well, some chapters, nothing happens. Yeah. So I never had it based where I'm not going chapter by chapter. I'm just going to do a couple or whatever. And I think it's always important, especially in something like podcasting, where it's like, yeah, there are like quote unquote rules, but at the end of the day, there's no rules. Like, just do whatever makes the most sense for you. You don't have to go to these like pretend ideals. Like, no one's gonna not let you upload an episode because it's either shorter or longer than the normal. It was that kind of stuff just inspired me to be like, just do whatever makes the most sense to the art you're making or just your workflow. And don't worry about whatever people tell you you're supposed to do. It's stupid.
Yeah, the thing, I think there's so many things in Bo's work like that, where it really does it breaks the mold. It tells you, this is this. But one of the things that you compared to earlier was John Mulaney and seeing like Comeback Kid, and it feeling just sort of like fast food, and versus like performance. Or that makes it sound like John Mulaney's not performing. He's performing. It's just different. It's just, but something that I think is really cool about Bo that then strikes me about the shift to audio too, is that any of his stand-up specials, there are elements that if you're not watching it live, like watching it live is a specific experience, watching it on Netflix is a specific experience, and listening to the sort of comedy album is a totally different experience, because of the amount of mime jokes he does, or like dance jokes. Right.
I remember at one point when I was in a more traditional job and I would just listen to some stuff in the background. I remember stand-up sets were some of my favorite things to listen to. And I remember at one point remembering, oh yeah, Bo Burnham has album ones, and getting halfway through them and knowing what the joke was because I've seen it, and knowing why people are laughing even though nothing has been said, and then thinking, if someone hasn't seen this would be very confusing. And that's something that I also try to keep in mind when I'm doing podcast live shows. Usually I'm recording the audio from it and then uploading it later. I very much try to keep in mind, okay, there's many audiences here. There's the people here live, and there's the people here listening after the fact. How do I do a performance that appeals to both? And recently when I was on tour, I did a live show in Chicago where it was in person and live streamed, and then also I recorded it. So I had to keep in mind, okay, for the people here in the crowd, how do I make the best show? For the people live streaming, how do I do the best show? And for the people listening just to the audio after, how do I make the best show?
Yeah.
And it's something you got to keep in mind for sure.
Yeah, no, it's a struggle for sure. But I think something that is cool about Bo's, like you said, is if you've watched it and you listen to it, the performance is so specific that you know exactly what's happening.
Mhm.
But if you're just listening to it, truly good luck.
Yeah, yeah. Like you'll still laugh at some of the jokes, but
Yeah.
when certain things happen, you're gonna be out of the loop.
Yeah. I think there is, I'm trying to remember which special it is, but there is one special where he says, I just did 7 minutes of mime jokes for the people listening at home.
Yeah.
Um, which, yeah, I think there's something really cool about his specificity and how that can move into your own work and how you can kind of be so aware of your audience. Like you said, there are 3 different audiences here, and how do you serve all of them?
Mhm.
Do you find that you deal with the kind of the same pressure that he talks a lot about in his specials? Like you've got, I think every special there's a song where he talks about kind of that audience perceived pressure.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. I remember when we first watched Inside, because at that point, I'd been doing this full time for a couple of years, and he had all the different songs about it. I remember either when it was over or if we paused it at some point, my wife turned to me and just said, are you okay? Like, do you feel these things? And I was like, kind of, but not this badly. But yeah, I definitely feel some of the pressures of always having to make stuff and always having to be on. And thankfully, I've kind of adapted my workflow to get better, because when I first started the show, it was just a side project thing and I had a full-time job. It would come out every other week. Then there was enough support both from Patreon and from ad stuff that I made it every week. And then it was just a weird thing that I realized, especially when I went full-time, is like people are expecting the free podcast episode to come out every single Monday. You don't get a vacation day. Like people don't care that it's December 25th. It's Monday.
Yeah.
There's supposed to be a new episode of Potterless. What are you doing? So now with the Newest Olympian, if there's a month that has 5 Mondays in it, I'll take the 5th one off. And then there's a couple other ones that I will do during the year. So now I have 6 weeks out of the year where an episode is not being posted. People know it. It's a very public thing of, hey, there's no episode this week. And that way I can either take a week off or just take a week to work on the other things. Because there's so many other things I have to do that sometimes when it's my week off, I just spend the whole week not doing podcast editing, or I'll record to get ahead or update website things or whatever. So I've tried to adapt to make my work life a little easier. But then also, the pressure of just, I have to be on social media. I have to be posting stuff every now and then, because if people lose interest in me, then they lose interest in the podcast or vice versa. And I definitely feel the pressure to just be on. And some of the things that he made fun of in Inside, where it's like, when it was the brands posting like all of the Black Lives Matter things, like, what does Bugle think about George Floyd? Those are kind of things where, it was weird, where I was in the space of like, I want to post something, but I don't want to be insensitive. What do I like? I have those pressures too. And there's a lot of the things that you talk about. A lot of the things that he does talk about, I definitely feel, and it gets hard at times, but I'm glad. I appreciate that people liked Inside so much, and the outtakes and stuff, where people can kind of see some of the pressure that there is behind being such a public creator and stuff like that, that I think hopefully people understand. Even more so with stuff like that, I just hope people understand that like podcasting isn't just recording and hitting upload. There's a lot of other stuff that goes into it. And I think if there's more and more content where people kind of take people behind the curtain and they realize what goes into it and what it is like and all of that, people can get a better understanding for the certain pressures that are on there. So I feel them, but thankfully I'm doing all right where it's not like really bringing me down.
Yeah.
But I'm okay.
Well, like, I guess sometimes I think it can help I've been talking a lot about this in the context of grief, of just wishing people would talk about it more. So like talking about the harder things, where does it ever help just honestly to watch it and have your wife go, oh, like, is that how you feel? But when you haven't necessarily articulated it.
It totally helps. And it helps to have other people, especially people who are much more well-known, talk about it and let people in. So yes, I think that that's a good thing. And I always want people to have more of an understanding of the work that goes into certain jobs that people think are easy. And I'm glad that more people are getting the appreciation. That was like one of the nice things about when everybody tried to start a podcast during the pandemic in the early stages. They realized, oh, this is actually hard.
Yeah.
Oh, this actually costs money. Oh, you're not just talking with your friends. Oh, like everybody doing a podcast and posting 2 episodes and then giving up. I was like, okay, now some more people understand
Yeah, I know you get
what
it.
goes into it. You know, you
Yeah.
still get some people that are very entitled to their free podcast that I make all of the time. But what's nice is because I've been open about it and other people are open about it, anytime I do something like when I instituted with the Newest Olympian that I was going to take breaks, you still get some people that are like, oh, grumble, grumble, where's my free podcast? But thankfully, the more dedicated people and the listeners who over the years have stuck with me and supported me either on Patreon or just like been nice on social media or whatever, those types of folks are always very understanding when I take those breaks off, or if I have a situation where I just had a really busy week and instead of an episode going up right at 12:01 a.m. on Monday, I have to work on it the next morning and I upload it, you know, around lunchtime. Thankfully, people are more understanding. And I see this with other people just on social media with the YouTubers and stuff. If everyone's like, hey, it's just too much, I got to take a break, people are understanding. And I hope that continues. And I also, just by getting older, I think I feel less of the pressure, and I'm fortunate enough where I think that I can do the kind of thing where if I have to take a step back, I can.
Yeah.
Like whenever Kelly and I start to have kids, I'm just gonna be like, hey, the podcast is coming out every other week for 6 months. Everybody deal with it. Like I'm a dad now. Bye. Like I'm just gonna do that. And if they don't like it, like kick rocks. You know, like I'm also by getting older realizing that there are more important things, and it's scary because with podcasting, I've had this happen where like if you take a week off, if it's not built in, if you take a week off, like then the episodes on the next one are down, and then you think, oh no, did I mess up? Like because 1 week was gone, did everybody give up on the podcast? And I think I had those pressures early on, but thankfully I've been able to do some things to make that less of a concern.
Yeah. Yeah. I think also even just tying it back to Bo, he took a huge break after Make Happy, and people are happy to continue consuming his content. So
right. I think you have the luxury there of if you're truly big, then you can be like Bo Burnham and just take a year off Instagram and then post, hey, I'm making a special, and then everybody freaks out. I don't think I would get the same reaction if I just like bounced off Twitter and Instagram for a while and then was like, hey guys, I'm back. They'd be like, oh, okay.
Who are you?
So it's a little
different.
Yeah, a little bit different when I'm like always actively trying to make sure me/my shows are reaching a new audience and stuff.
Yeah.
But it would, I would love to be in the place where I can just be like, all right, and just get completely just bounce off.
Yeah.
It'd be great. But unfortunately, I don't have that luxury.
Yeah, very fair. I think people would miss you though.
Thank you. That's
there's at
very
least
kind of
that. No, I think it is always interesting to me because that like entitlement or where's my free podcast? It's Monday. There is like the flip side of like you're angry because you want to spend your Monday with me, so that's kind of nice.
Yeah, you know, people are only angry because they really like it.
Yeah.
That's a good perspective. But also, I don't know, the people who always complain of where's the free podcast are never the people who support the Patreon. Funnily enough, you know, it's never the people that care enough to help you out directly. They just want their free thing.
Yeah, like, give me my Monday. Yeah. Especially,
yeah, I love it. Is funny. Sometimes people are like, if I have a week off, it's like, oh, it's Monday. How am I going to get through the workday? Like, I don't know. Listen to something else. Like,
you can re-listen to an old episode.
Right, they're still there. Like, I make 5 podcasts. Like, there's plenty of other stuff you can listen to.
God, yeah, it is crazy. It's like you've inserted yourself enough and people like it enough that they're like, man, you're ruining my week by not being here. But at the same time, you're like, okay, listen.
I also apparently saved your week for the past 12 consecutive. Sorry that I'm taking a 1 week break so that I can go to bed.
It's like, no, you should do it sleep deprived and give it to me. I want to hang. Yeah, no, I think there is something very interesting in that parasocial relationship that comes out of it too.
Yeah. The parasocial thing, it's hard because it's good and bad.
Yeah.
Like I do appreciate that some people, especially this is something I didn't anticipate before making any of my shows, like people saying that my podcast got them through any sort of hard time. Like that is the coolest thing. And I never anticipated it. People, you know, whether it was getting through work or commutes, or if someone was in the hospital, whether it was like them or somebody that they love and they just had to like sit in boring waiting rooms and they wanted to take their mind off it. Like all that kind of stuff is so cool. And some people are like, oh, is it weird? Like, I feel like I know you. It's like, hey, if it helps and it's bringing joy to you, like, great. Yeah. But then there is the flip side where there is like the bad stuff where people think that they know who I am. And normally it's all like innocent, but like something that sometimes is frustrating is on social media, me and my friends, especially me growing up where I did in New Jersey, the way that me and my friends talk to each other is like making fun of each other. And then some people will do that to me on social media. It's like, hey, I don't know you. Like, if I'm sad because the Knicks lost, like, don't make fun of me. I don't know who you are, random person who likes the Dallas Mavericks. Like, you don't get to do this. My friend Adam gets to because I give him crap for stuff, but I know him in real life.
Yeah.
So sometimes there can be some weird things like that. And then another thing that'll happen sometimes is people will listen to what I've said on the podcast and then like either take something that I said out of context or like misinterpret what I said or what I meant. And whether they are talking about me like in a subreddit or a Facebook group, or they'll say it to me, sometimes it's frustrating because people are like, oh, I think Mike thinks this. And it's like, that is not what I think.
Yeah.
And then sometimes directly to me, people will be like, oh, you said this, but that's bad because blah, blah, blah. And then they'll like they'll make some sort of point that I didn't make. And then they'll have an argument with that point. And I'm like, yeah, I also would argue at that point. But I didn't say that. So I don't know, like this pretend Mike Schubert you've made up, like, yeah, that guy sucks. I don't like him either.
Yeah.
But I didn't say that. So I don't know who you're talking to or who you're talking about. So there are some tricky things that come with it.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that Bo Burnham and other folks like make it clear that it's hard because a lot of people, and I have to realize like I am very fortunate to have this job, but there still are like some tough things that come with it. So it's this weird balance of like, I'm very lucky just to be able to, read books and talk about them and all the other stuff that goes with making the show. But like at the end of the day, my job is very fun and cool, but it's also like really hard. I put in a lot of work and there's a lot of stuff that goes with it. And I get a lot of angry emails and I try to, respond to them. So it's this balance where I never want to complain about my job because I've been in 9-to-5s that I hate. And I know people have jobs that they really don't like.
Yeah.
And it's a blessing for me to be able to enjoy what I do, even if it is hard sometimes. But at the same time, my job isn't just all unicorns and rainbows. It does take a lot of work. There are some hard things that come with it. Sometimes people say things that really hurt my feelings. Like it happens.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that there's other people who are more creative than I, like Bo Burnham, who can like in an artful way kind of make something that people will get it.
Yeah.
So that way people can understand it without him just saying like, hello, here is why being an independent creator is sometimes challenging. Instead, he can make a funny song about it and the people go, oh, I get it. Oh, maybe I should have more patience. Like that kind of thing. I appreciate that because I don't have the ability to make something except being direct, like, hello, stop yelling at me. And then it just sounds like you're complaining, which I'm not. But also, like, sometimes my job is hard.
Yeah.
So cut me some slack sometimes.
Yeah, I think what's hard about it is like the reason it's so good is you can make it look so easy and fun, and then people feel that they can, well, it's he's just reading a book and talking about it. How hard could it be? Like very difficult, actually.
Right. And that's especially with podcasting, and you edit this show and I edit my shows, or at least with some shows, like I have someone do a first pass of the edits.
Yeah.
If you edit, and I think this goes to all of podcasting, but specifically with editing, if you do a perfect job, no one knows you did anything.
Exactly. Yeah. No, it should sound sit down like you turned on the microphone, and that's it.
Yeah. And that's the difference between an episode of a podcast that's conversational, because people think some conversational shows are just, oh, you're just talking.
Right.
But the difference between You Made It Weird and a good conversational show is you do a lot of pre-production work. You prepare and plan questions. I'm sure that you put a lot of thought into what we were going to talk about today and prep and all of that. I got that sense from your emails and all that, which is why I said yes to doing this. And you've done a great job of steering this conversation. And I think people might just think, oh, they're just talking about Bo Burnham. It's like, no, like there was a lot of thought put in to this podcast by Marissa, trying to think, what do I ask? How do I steer this? It's all of podcasting is like, the more work you do, the easier it sounds. And it's really tricky.
I will say I wasn't planning to do this, but I'm so glad we did.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just something people need to realize.
Yeah, no, it's an effort. It's also, nobody wants to listen to the parts of the conversation where you go, because then you could just talk to real people. Yeah. It doesn't make me feel comfortable to realize that you don't know what to say. Yeah. I also think one thing I did want to ask you about, though, is I think the stuff that you've chosen to podcast about is perhaps you've chosen something that has a huge fandom, whether it's basketball, whether it's Harry Potter, now with the Newest Olympian. Each of the things that you've chosen have fandoms that are there's sort of half of them are those people that are like, you shouldn't have left your hand in the way of the door, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Which feels like a really bold choice. So I'm really curious about taking that risk.
Sure. So with Potterless, it was completely accidental.
Yeah.
The first like podcast that I truly like put publicly and had some work into was about Vine. And the whole thing was just trying to prove from my friends that I made from Vine, like, yeah, this is an unconventional way to make friends, but you can just make friends from Vine. So I would just interview my friends that I made, and we would talk about our relationship and then also how they came upon the app, what kind of stuff they make, etc. I did it for a year, and then I thought, okay, this has been fun, but the only people listening to this are people who are already on Vine and they just want to hear the other people that I'm having on talk about it. So it wasn't really like achieving its thesis statement. And then with Potterless, I very much enjoyed doing podcasting. I wanted to do something, and I thought, okay, I should do something that is more broad and not just from an audience perspective, but more of just like, I want to do something that could appeal to a lot of people. And then the first thing I thought of was, well, everybody's read Harry Potter. And then I thought, oh, I haven't. Oh, wait, that's the podcast. So with Potters, it was completely accidental. I also had no idea like what a Harry Potter fan meant. I thought if you read the books more than once, you were a big Harry Potter fan. I had no idea what I was walking into with the people who are as intense about it as they are. And then, yeah, some of those people, great. Some of those people, awful.
Yeah.
So it's something that I didn't necessarily realize at first. But I think with Potterless, what it shaped me with doing things like Horse is that was just trying to bring fandom. I thought was always really interesting. And as a big old nerd, I think that being able to nerd out about stuff with your friends is great. And that's kind of at least the good parts of what fandom is. And then Horse, it was trying to bring in new people like, hey, basketball can be for everybody. And then some of the other shows I did were less about it, like Meddling Adults. I don't know that like there's a huge Encyclopedia Brown community out there, but we all have some sort of nostalgia towards children's mysteries. And then Modern Muckraker, that stuff is definitely about like the pop culture and the fandom of it, because that specifically is like some of my favorite things to do are just like ask really specific what if questions. And that's basically what Modern Muckraker is. And with the Newest Olympian, I think that was similar, where it was just like the joy of the good Potterless fans. Let me try to, all these people have been recommending those books to me while I was making the show anyway. And then when J.K. Rowling became very not a cool person, and Rick Riordan was very clear that he is a good person who does this novel thing we talked about called apologizing. That just gave me hope that this would be a good fandom. So I think I found fandom to be very interesting. I didn't know about like the toxic elements of it, but I think it was fun for me with Potterless and some of these other shows that I've done, just to bring like a new perspective into it. So Potterless, the whole thing was I didn't read the Harry Potter books as a kid. What if there was someone reading them for the first time as an adult? Horse, it was, okay, what if we made a basketball show, but it was to nerds who don't like sports? And, you know, with Meddling Adults, is like, okay, what if it was adults solving the children? What if it was adults solving the children's mysteries? Are we any good, or are we just as bad as we were when we were teenagers trying to watch it? With Modern Muckraker, it's just, what if we ask the most specific questions that no one's ever asked before, but these are the things you like get drunk or high with your friends and talk about. Like, yeah, when should Spider-Man take the subway? Why does he waste all that energy? So the thing is, like, there is the good and the bad with fandom. But the good of fandom allows you to do things like be a full-time podcaster.
Yeah.
So you take the good with the bad, and you just hope the good outweighs the bad. And I think that that's what gravitated me more towards podcasting than some of the other things I've done, like YouTube, where you can have a bit more toxic stuff going on. I think podcasting, the creators I had found for the most part are more welcoming and less cutthroat. YouTube, for me, at least when I did it, was like very cutthroat and it was very competitive. Podcasting is very much like trying to rising tide lifts all ships kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I also think listeners, maybe because you're just like committing to an hour-long thing as opposed to a 4-minute YouTube video, I feel like listeners are generally kinder. And it's, you know, if you're really trying to be mean to a podcaster, you have to really go out of your way to do it. Whereas in YouTube, you're already watching there, you can just type something crappy in the comments. So I have found it to be just a more welcoming area. So I think that it lends itself to nicer fans, so it's a little easier to do the nice fandom kind of stuff. But yeah, I just like nerding out with my friends, and now I get to do that. And I think the biggest thing about being a nerd versus being a snob about it, if
Mm.
you're a nerd, you want everybody to like the thing that you like. And if you're a snob, you want to brag, oh, I saw Bo Burnham at Numbers nightclub in Houston. I saw him before he was cool. Like, you don't want to be a snob. You want to be a nerd, and nerding out is trying to tell everybody this thing I like is cool. Here's why it's cool. Let me talk to you about it. And
Yeah.
I'm kind of doing the reverse of that of I've heard this thing is cool. Let me figure out why it's cool on my own. Hey, Percy Jackson books are really good.
Yeah.
So it's been very fun, and I'm very appreciative to big fans of stuff for letting me do this as a job.
I love that. Yeah, well, it's so funny that you say it in that way. Like, I saw Bo Burnham before he was cool. Like, I'm so cool. Like,
I'm glad he's a big deal now.
Yeah.
It made me sad that not enough people knew about him. So if people find Inside and then watch the old stuff, like, yay. Like,
Yeah,
people
right.
who are very good more people should know about them.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember because I think his YouTube videos, like Bo for Show and New Math.
Yeah, those were like 2010-ish.
So I was like definitely like sophomore year-ish of high school, and I remember me and like the 4 friends I had that were super into it getting to the point that we could like actually do the whole rap on time
Oh,
together.
yeah.
And
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And you know
As
how you
one
do it.
does when you're in high school. Yeah.
And I remember doing that in like the locker hall and just having no shame about it. Like no one, so many people were like, what's going on over there? And why are you all rapping math problems? Like kind of problematic, loudly math problems. We're like, we're just having a great time. But I think it's so cool now because those same girls that in high school were like, what are you doing? Are like, have you seen Inside? Like it was so great.
Mhm.
And there's something really wonderful about that spread.
Yeah. I also think, specifically with you talking about New Math, it does make sense for me and my brand of comedy. The jokes that I always liked the most from him were not the edgy ones. I think my favorite line from New Math might be, what's the opposite of LNX? Duraflame, the unnatural log.
Yes!
Like, those are always the jokes where I was like, a clever wordplay, as opposed to when he was like, what if I make a joke about the C word?
Yeah. Yeah, I think I always love the same thing where it was like, no, you have to listen to it 3 times and then you'll get it. It's funny,
Right.
I promise.
There's
Like,
even some every now and then with him or other people that do play on word stuff. I'll be like in the shower as thinking of the song and be like, whoa, I've just said this lyric for 20 years, but now I get it, the pun.
yeah. Yeah, one thing I'm curious about too is like when it was so small, when you did go to that first show in Numbers, the nightclub in Houston. I'm also just imagining like a neon sign above like a secret door that just says like 1, 2, 3. Like that's I have no idea what it actually looks like, but that's what's been in my head this whole time. But the other people that were there, where you kind of feel like you're at something that is not widely known, it is $20. You got a couple people to go with you. What was the kind of environment like of the other people that were there?
I mean, it was definitely a bunch of people who either were making or watching a lot of YouTube videos. Yeah, it was just a big group of Tumblr nerds and stuff, and it was great. I was with my people, and it was fun because what I always appreciated at those kinds of shows, and I think that this show was probably the first example, is like the crowd was very diverse in any sort of way. The age was probably the least range, but it wasn't just nerdy white boys. There were all sorts of people there, and that's what I appreciated about that kind of stuff, is you can appeal to anybody. And that's what I've always appreciated about doing my shows, is that you've got a wide range, old, young, any sort of walk of life. I remember there was one of my friends from college who was like this absolute just ripped, go to the gym, like big sports dude, loved college basketball, all into that kind of stuff, like beer pong, drinking games, all this kind of stuff. And one time he messaged me like a year or 2 out of college and was like, hey, I really, really like your Harry Potter podcast. And then he would message me about it all the time. And I was like, you of all people? Wow. Like, it was so surprising. So I think that Bo Burnham audience was a very diverse group. And anytime I do a show and I see the crowd out there, I'm very happy to see that the crowd does not look homogenous. And I think that also has informed the shows that I kind of make. I feel like early on, maybe this is just me, but I feel like every time you make a show, you imagine all the listeners are just other versions of you. Like when I was 26 and I started the show, it's like, oh, everybody's 26. Everybody's me that listens to it. They'll get all the jokes. So as I've gone on and as I've understood more that there's so many different people out there that are listening, that makes me want to make the show able to be enjoyed by everyone. And that's what truly shaped. I didn't realize there'd be kids listening to Potterless, and I used to curse all up and down that show. So when I made the Newest Olympian, I was like, all right, I've gotten enough nice emails from 12-year-olds that I'm going to not curse in this one. I'm also 30 now, so I can be a big boy and find a non-curse word to say and make it just as funny. So it's something that I appreciated with Bo Burnham and appreciate now, is that there's no like one stereotypical listener, and that's great, especially for my show. Like other shows, like people listen to Barstool podcasts, like I can probably guess what those guys look like. But for other podcasts, not necessarily the case. You know what a Joe Rogan podcast listener looks like, but
you would be surprised. I will be honest
damn
with you.
it.
It is shocking to me.
Damn it.
But you know, that one specifically.
Jeepers creepers.
I was talking to someone and they revealed that about themselves, and I was like, oh,
woof.
I didn't expect that.
I was working at a coffee shop and I heard the table next to me. So I heard on the Joe Rogan podcast and I was like, should I move? Like I should probably find a new table.
I gotta go, I think. Suddenly this coffee sounds terrible. That's, oh man. No, I think that's a really good point though, because I think part of that comes from the lack of punching down.
Yeah. Everybody feels welcome.
Yeah, everybody feels like they can be there.
That is something, it shapes like how I do the show, because I want anybody to be able to listen to it and feel comfortable. But also when I am doing a live performance of the show, I try very hard to make sure not only is it just anybody could be here because of diverse audience, but also I know a lot of people there got dragged there by their significant other. Like, hello, I'm bringing my husband because I listen to this podcast, but he doesn't, but I don't want to go to this live show alone. So when I perform live, really try to make sure that if someone has been brought here that has no idea what Harry Potter is or Percy Jackson or whatever the show I'm doing is, I want to make sure that the people dragged here had a good time. And the highest compliment that I can ever receive is when like the person at the venue who was running the merch booth, who had no idea what Harry Potter was, after the show goes, that was really funny. Like that's the highest compliment I can receive. And when those people say they enjoy the show, then I'm like, yes, let's go. Like I try to make it so that anybody can have a good time. So yeah, it's something that goes into the show, but also the actual performances themselves.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think it's lovely that you got to have that experience too, where it's just like everybody that is in this room with me and my little flip camera is having it was a very 2007 episode.
Oh yeah. it was a great, it was prime 2015. I was wearing a zip up hoodie. Like it was prime.
Like an American Apparel.
I was probably wearing an American Apparel V-neck with some quirky joke on it, and then I had a zip up hoodie, one of those like, big chunky rubbery bracelets that had some sort of thing on it. Probably my one that said "make videos every day" that I got from VidCon.
VidCon. Oh man. Whew, I feel like we went on a time machine today. I really loved it. Well, this has been so much fun. I think we've ended on a really nice note, so I'm going to ask you our question that we end with every time.
Okay.
So if you had never gone to Numbers 123 in Houston and seen Bo Burnham live, what would be different about you today?
There's two directions I see things, how they could have gone. Because at the end of the day, the biggest thing that this inspired me by seeing the show and why I picked this to talk about for this episode is that it truly showed me there's no one way to make a career in comedy. I remember even thinking it was astonishing, like, oh, Bo Burnham didn't even go to college. Whoa. So this show proved to me you can do whatever you want. You don't have to follow any sort of rules. If you have an audience, people are going to come. Just do whatever. Make the videos that you want to make the content you want to make. I feel like if I hadn't seen this, and maybe there's multiple directions, but if I hadn't seen this and I hadn't seen what Bo was doing with the tour, I maybe would have been convinced like the only way to go is be the big full-time YouTuber or the big full-time Viner or the big full-time whatever, like inherently tied to some sort of platform. And that's what's nice about podcasting. It's like, it's beyond platform. Like it's a big enough thing. So maybe that would have been a direction. Another direction is if I thought, okay, if I didn't realize that you can be more untraditional, I would have really worked at like, I have to be on an improv team and do sketch comedy so that I can audition for SNL. And then from there, I'll get on the show and then whatever. Like, I feel like I would have been so locked into either going the like improv sketch SNL route or putting all the eggs into the stand-up basket and just like really doing that and just going all in on that. The other thing is maybe I'm just an engineer still, like doing some fun stuff on the side, and maybe that is like I do engineering and then I just do open mic nights and that's it. So like I think just because podcasting was so interesting, and especially when I joined, like it wasn't as established as it was, and I was just so okay with rolling with the punches and doing whatever. And, you know, someone saying, oh, there's this thing called Patreon. Cool, I'll do that. Like, you know, just being able to just kind of adapt and not feel like there's got to be the one thing you do. I think that's what allowed me to be more flexible and not so rigid. So I don't know exactly what my life would be like, but I would be definitely taking a more rigid path. And I think fluidity has allowed me to make the inevitable leap to where I got to do this full time.
Well, thank you to Mr. Bo Burnham for giving us some flexibility in life, I think.
Yes. Thank you, Bo. Thank you very
Bo.
much.
We love you. Oh, man. All right. Well, thanks for hanging with me, Mike. If you guys are listening, please be sure to check out the extreme number of podcasts that Mike makes for you for free every Monday. Except for Mondays where he's really tired.
Yeah, come on. Let me sleep, please. You like sleep? Let me do it.
No.
Fine. Okay, you win.
Yeah, thank you so much. All right, we'll be back next week. Maybe.
Bye. Yeah, no, if you got to sleep, you sleep.
Yeah, we'll be back unless I'm tired.
All sleep.
Okay, but in all honesty, we will be back next Wednesday with a brand new guest. I won't leave you hanging even for a well-deserved nap. But if you're looking for something to listen to in between, Mike was kind enough to have me on his show, The Newest Olympian, in which we dive into the Titan's Curse and one of my favorite book series ever. So if you want to check that out, it's called The Newest Olympian, and you can listen to it wherever you get your podcasts. And I will see you next Wednesday. Until then, make sure to sign up for our newsletter, which has some bonus information from the show, some notes from me, some fun stuff from our guests. You can get that on my Twitter at Marissa Kumari, or you can get it on our website at tandonproductions.com. Just go ahead and click our show art on the homepage. Until then, I'll see you next Wednesday.